Today's guest is paranormal researcher, investigator, and author Eric Freeman Sims. With over 2 decades of experience exploring hauntings, spirits, and strange phenomena, Eric recently released his book, Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee, a deep dive into eerie stories from places you've never heard of. And he's also the event coordinator for Goblin Con 2025, which is celebrating 70 years since the legendary Hopkinsville Goblin incident, which I am very excited to talk about because I was talking to Eric before we started recording and saying, this is the first time in nearly 300 recorded episodes for this podcast that I get to talk about it. So firstly, Eric, thanks so much for joining me, mate. Let's start from the beginning. What first pulled you into the world of the paranormal?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been haunted my entire life. I've had things, the first incident that I remember is when I was 8. My parents actually bought the house that I still live in. I inherited it from my parents, but they bought it before it was built. And so I don't know what the land, happened on the land before, but we've lived here since it was new. But I woke up when I was 8 years old in the middle of the night, sat straight up in the bed, looked at my door, and it was open, and there was a lady standing at the door you might recognize. And it scared me, so I jumped up, flipped the light on, and slammed the door. And that was the first, a full-body apparition was the first paranormal experience I can remember. And then what really kind of threw me into it was my father passed away when I was 14 in 1997. And I was already into aliens and watching Unsolved Mysteries, and Unsolved Mysteries, I always wanted to see the ghost stuff. That was what always interested me. And so when he passed away, he was agnostic, which is kind of how I was raised. And so I wanted to prove to myself that he didn't just disappear, that, that he went on and there's something beyond us. And so that kind of threw me full force into going out and sneaking in locations, of course. Back then, that's where all the TV shows and things like that. So there really wasn't locations to go into. So we'd sneak to some of the historical locations around Nashville where I live and experience things. And so it's just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. The fact that you kind of grew up in that haunted house and you kind of continue to own it today, that's such rich family history that you can kind of just pass on to future generations or anything like that, because it is just so special to hold on to a place like that. How old were you when you first saw that apparition, did you say?
I was 8.
8 years old. And
around 8, yeah.
Wow. So at 8 years old, what goes through your mind? Like, were you thinking, oh, wow, that's a ghost?
Well, I grew up in a family that was very open about talking about hauntings, because before I was born, when they first moved to Tennessee from Indiana, they had lived in a haunted house here in Tennessee that they rented. And there was an older lady apparition who used to tuck people into bed at night, especially if you slept up in the upstairs, like attic room. She was a very nice spirit, and like she scared them because it's a ghost, and like they didn't know what was going on. But for all intents and purposes, they said that she was always nice and tucking the kids in the bed, and that was kind of an overseer and made sure that everybody was safe and good. And so my family's just kind of been that way and open about talking about hauntings and things. So at that age, I went and talked to my parents about it, and they were just, explaining that's just a person that lived. Like, we don't know where they came from, but they're still a person, just in a different kind of plane. So with the family being open about that, a lot of people's families aren't. They're told it's your imagination or whatever, or because of religion, looking through the guise of religion, they have different explanations and things. But it was kind of easy just because, like I said, my family was so open about talking about experiences they'd had and things like that. So
yeah, that's really interesting, the fact that your family was so open about it, because you're 100% right. Like, a lot of families are really kind of down low on that type of conversation. They do not want to talk about it. It kind of, oh no, that's in you imagine that didn't really happen. So for your family to kind of be so open and kind of transparent about that with you, that's a really surprising thing. And like, especially considering how your father was.
Yeah. My mom was religious because her dad was a Southern Baptist preacher when she was growing up. But yeah, my dad was very much agnostic, and I kind of took on his beliefs. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's basically not subscribing to any one religion, but still believing in something kind of beyond us. And so not atheist. A lot of people equate agnosticism with atheism, and it's not, or paganism, and it's not. It's just I have a wide belief in something beyond us, just not putting labels on it or certain religion. But yeah, growing up in that environment, my parents kind of let me make up my own mind about religion and things like that. And I went to church and, experienced all these different churches to figure out and I kind of settled back on agnosticism as my explanation. But and especially growing up in the South, the Southern United States, I live in the Bible Belt in Tennessee, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, and so a lot of the churches are like, anything paranormal is demon. There's no spirits, it's all demons. And I still get that from little old ladies in my town today. They'll see me out and they'll recognize me from whatever a talk I've done around town or a book signing or something. And they'll be like, "You're dealing with demons, you're going to hell." I'm like, "All right, whatever, granny."
I do love that approach to it, because like that Bible Belt, it is very, very full on, and you've lived your entire life down there and you'd know exactly what that's like. And to be that young, like, were you able to talk about this to anyone outside of your family, or was it that were you kind of just keeping it in the family, so to say, when you're talking about all these weird and strange and unexplainable things kind of going on in that house?
When I was that young, I kind of kept it to myself. I was the weird kid, not very popular. I would go to the book fairs at school and be the one looking for the Bigfoot and ghost books and alien stuff and alien posters all over my room. And I had friends. I wasn't like a lonely kid, but I was kind of a dork. But once I got older, like I said, when my dad died when I was 14, I had friends around me who were kind of interested in the same weird stuff. And so I had a group of friends that would go with me whenever we go to these places and do investigations. And then that kind of snowballed. As people heard about it, more and more people were like, "Oh my God, I want to go." And I didn't even know there was such a thing as a ghost hunter or people that got together in groups back then until I was probably 18 or 19 when I got a book for Christmas for one of my friends that was a beginner's guide to ghost hunting. And I was like, people really get together and do this? Like, I thought this was just like a high school thing, high school kids sneaking into supposedly haunted places. And then shortly after I graduated, that's when kind of the TV shows kind of fell into place and it became more popular. But yeah, I was lucky to have a group of friends when I was a teenager that kind of supported it and didn't think I was crazy. Because when we would go out, they would see things too and experience things too for the first time. And to them, it was more of adrenaline rush, to where me, I was kind of a little more serious about it. But they were all pretty serious about it, but we had a good time doing it too. Yeah,
no, that's really cool. That's fascinating that you had that circle of friends so young who are all kind of into that weird and wonderful, because I was very much like you. I was that weird kid at school who always got the UFO books, the Bigfoot books, the haunted books, things like that. Yeah. So the fact that you found like that little circle of friends who were so into it with you is fantastic, because it's obviously fully ingrained itself into your life. Like I would say it's safe to say, like, you kind of build your entire life around the paranormal or the unusual, because you've been doing this now for over 20 years. So, like, what actually keeps you curious after all this time?
I think it is the rush at this point in time, because I'm a huge history buff, which I think a lot of us in the paranormal are, especially if you're into like ghost hunting and, paranormal investigation in that aspect. Because I always say that 80% of what we do with the paranormal investigation is history. The other 20% is trying to connect with those people that you've learned about in history. So to me, it's that rush of actually talking to somebody who lived in 1850 or earlier, whatever, wherever you're investigating, and actually talking to that person that is very two-dimensional on paper when it comes to like history, but to actually get some sort of attitude, or even if they cuss you out, like you kind of learn more about them as a person, and they're more 3D or just two-dimensional history on paper and dates and things like that. History can be very, very, very boring. But then when you throw the paranormal, I think it makes it more exciting. And that's part of the reason of writing the book that I did, because most of the book is history. But then I throw the ghost stories in for the entertaining. So I'm teaching people, but also entertaining with talking about these people living beyond the history, the very two-dimensional history that I wrote about.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that you speak about interacting with the paranormal and, essentially spirits, is that's a really unique way, because it's almost like you're kind of treating them almost as like these time capsules. You're interacting with this, I guess, the ball of energy that is essentially, a snapshot of history. And that's a fascinating way to approach a spirit, because I've never even considered it in that kind of way, because a lot of people who kind of report, they have incidents with ghosts or spirits or entities or things like that. it always seems to be like of a Victorian era, you know, of a yesteryear. And it's never really clicked to me that, you know, you are actually speaking to something almost in a completely different timeline. And that's super fascinating.
Yeah, and I think even with like residual hauntings, where, you know, that we think it's just kind of a movie replaying, I found those interesting too, because to me, that's a snapshot of that moment in time. And it may be something as boring as the spirit walks the same path every day. But to me, they did that so much that they ingrained themselves on that path and that environment, you know, and that was part of their lives. But also going with I guess a sense of reverence and respect for the people as well, especially in historical places that have, well, not even historical places, but just a place that these people lived, and now they possibly stay there or come back to there because they loved it so much. So like the house that I own that I'll tell you about in Hopkinsville, that's was built in 1815, 210 years old. To walk in those same footsteps is amazing. Like most of the house is the original flooring. And so when I go in there in the morning, I tell them good morning, and I talk to them like they're still there. And I get and they interact. They respond back with knocks and footsteps and, you know, tap me on the shoulder, things like that. And talking about the like Victorian era ghosts and things like that. Well, in our house, we have a modern spirit who just passed away about 10 years ago.
No kidding, because
yeah,
and you know what? It's popular culture. It's very much to blame for the whole, you know, ghosts are always Victorian era, older days, things like that. And it's very rare to kind of hear someone talk about, I had an encounter with a ghost who was like wearing a snapback hat or, you know, something like that.
Right.
But I always do find it fascinating when people do come forward to talk about it, because again, I think a lot of people maybe just kind of put a blanket term over, I saw a ghost. So it is someone from the, you know, yesteryear from the Victorian era. So I think that's really cool that you've got a bit of a modern day guest staying at your house.
Yeah, and it's also a sensitive subject because he still has people living in the community, right? So that's family. So you kind of tiptoe around it. Like, we talk about it because I think in a way it's keeping his memory alive as well, and that he's still there. Whether his family does or not, I don't know. I've had his older brother in the house to walk around the house because they grew up there. But I don't think they agree. He's 87 years old, so I think his beliefs are a bit different, you know, from a different time and era. But I just look at it that I'm keeping his brother's memory alive, to whereas he could have just faded into the history of this house. And, you know, once his brother's gone, that's most of his immediate family's gone. And so who's going to remember him then? You know, and I think everybody deserves to be honored in a way and remembered, whether they had this huge contribution on history or not. You know, with the house that we own, the Night House, I always tell, especially the people who live in Hopkinsville, we just own the house. The history is yours. And that's how I want it to be, is to teach people the history. And if I can do that through the paranormal, a lot of people think that we're taking advantage of the paranormal, or that we're being disrespectful because we're allowing people to come in and investigate. But I think it's allowing people to come in and see this beautiful house that these people don't want to leave. That's why they're still there. The spirits are still there because they love this house so much. And I think the spirits are having a blast talking to all the investigators that come in. And they all come in with respect. They have to sign a rule sheet, and if they break any of those rules, they're asked to leave. You know, and so I don't know. I guess it's just a reverence for history and honoring that history and not forgetting it. Because a lot of these older houses that do have significance in older buildings, especially in the United States, are just being torn down. We'll just build damn apartments there or new houses, you know, that are. I mean, this house has lasted for 210 years. Through tornadoes and, you know, everything else. And houses today, the big bad wolf could come along and blow them over, you know, real quick. So, but just having a reverence for that history and the people that lived it, and the fact that still get to talk to them, is pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great, because it kind of opens up this whole other kettle of fish to go, you know, do ghosts have a sense of sentience to them? You know, are they able to understand what's going on? Are they able to have a cognitive discussion with something, like, or even with each other? Because this opens up that whole kind of thought process of like, do we actually continue on, or are kind of these spirits kind of like an imprint that we leave on the world when we go? Because there would have to be a sense of kind of loneliness if ghosts, spirits, entities, if they were able to kind of be sentient and really understand what they are, what they're doing. It'd be incredibly lonely if you were essentially stuck or haunting a location that you don't want to be in.
And I use that to a lot of people when people talk about scratches and getting pushed and things like that, or even getting like, I've been cussed out many times on EVPs, but I use that as an example. Like, it has to be awfully lonely. And if you're just trying to get people's attention, maybe the only way to get your attention is to scratch you. It's not some demonic, it's not some evil, or to push you or to touch you, or, they're just trying to get your attention. I also think that sometimes you just have nasty spirits. If you're, I say if you're an asshole in life, you're probably going to be an asshole in death.
100%.
If that sentience carries over, why would you change your attitude and your mood if you're the same type of person? I also think that maybe on some level that I think there's many different explanations for hauntings. I don't think it's just the two that the TV shows always spout, the residual and the intelligent. I think there's also other hauntings that are caused by time slips, things like that, to where we're the ghost of them, kind of like the movie The Others.
Yep.
Where her and her kids are actually the ghost, but the modern people are the ghost to her. She thinks they're haunted. And I think that happens sometimes too. I also think that we can go into a location and put an imprint of ourselves, kind of like a modern residual haunting. And then when we go back to that same location, we're actually talking to ourselves from a past.
Oh, now that's a head spin, isn't it?
Yeah.
that it's a cruel mind that I have here, because all that makes me think of is like the Bigfoot shows where you see guys kind of doing their howl out to other Bigfoot, and I always kind of think, are you guys just howling out to other people? And it kind of makes me think now, ghost hunters just talking to themselves from a previous exposition.
I think there are some places that does happen, and there's a couple of people who have kind of experimented with that. Nick Groff being one of them from Ghost Adventures. He used to be on Ghost Adventures, and he does his own thing now. But one of the things I respected about him, he did a series called, what was it called? I can't remember. Anyway, he did the series Ghost Walker or something like that, and he experimented with that, going back to places like extremely haunted places he had been to, like prisons and things where there's a lot of energy from trauma and things like that. And he would get his own name, but it sounded like it's coming from his own voice.
Yeah.
And so that's what made him think, because of all the trauma that was there and the energy that was there, did it capture a piece of me when I was here before, or in essence of my energy? And so basically when I was saying my name is Nick, when I was there before, is that just me repeating it back to myself now that I'm here in the future? But also people, if you think about physics and time and things, people think that time is very linear, and it's not. Time it's all happening at the same time, is what physicists and quantum physicists and everybody, all the scientists think.
Yep.
It's that all of history is just happening at the same time. And so, and physicists believe that we're all operating on a certain vibration. Everything's on a vibration. And so even, the desk in front of you is solid to us, but if you have the right vibration, you can see your hands through.
Yep. Yep.
If you're on the same wavelength. So with all that type of stuff, maybe they're just on a different wavelength than we are. And the reason that some people see spirits more than others is maybe you kind of match that wavelength, But yeah, I just have I think there's all different kind of explanations, even for Bigfoot. One of the explanations that I use for Bigfoot, and I'm not a Bigfoot guy, I've never been out looking for Bigfoot, but I've talked to a lot of people with the podcast and things like that, know a lot of Bigfoot investigators and researchers. And with the time slip thing, if you see a bear in the woods, you don't go poke it in the ass to make sure it's real, right?
100%.
So if you saw Bigfoot, you don't know if that's a time slip of like a earlier hominid, especially when it comes to like the woo, as they call it, Bigfoot disappearing and having these magical powers. Maybe it's just a time slip. Maybe sometimes when we see a deer in the woods or a bear or whatever, in your case, like kangaroos or koalas or whatever, maybe it's not really there. Maybe it's, but you don't go poke it to make sure it's real. It just looks real to you. And the fact that it's a real animal known to science, you just take it that it's there, it existed. Like it ran across the road in front of my car.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I kind of agree with you on that, because I think reality is only what you make of it. And that's pretty much the way I kind of look at things, because I really like that idea where you're saying like everything exists all at once. I'm a very big believer of that. And you hear of like stories of quantum entanglement and things like that. So if everything is all happening all at once, and if those two things overlap each other, like that whole thing about seeing into kind of different worlds and things like that, like seeing ghosts or seeing Bigfoot, how they just kind of disappear, it kind of almost starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah. And I think with the vibration theory, one of the things that the reason I kind of subscribe to that is because you can have, and even with Bigfoot, I think this is the Bigfoot sightings, when you have multiple people see the same Bigfoot sighting, a lot of times this is the case as well. You can have 5 people in the same room, and you can have an apparition pop up in front of you. All 5 people will see it completely differently. They'll have a completely different experience.
Yeah.
Some of them will see a full body apparition. Some of them will see a mist. Some of them will see a shadow. And I think it's the same thing with Bigfoot. When you have multiple people see Bigfoot, they have different experiences. It's that whole vibration thing.
Yeah, 100%. I actually find that a lot with UFO encounters. I find people who have shared UFO encounters, they all experience it just that little bit differently. And again, UFOs are this really big kind of topic at the moment. But I believe, this is just my personal belief, that they are kind of like an interdimensional kind of craft. And if that's gone that same kind of wavelength thing, that makes total sense.
Right. Yeah, and to be able to jump back and forth between dimensions because they figured out the whole vibration. And also, I think some of the UFO, UAP stuff that we see is actually us, just in the future.
100%. That is exactly what I think it is too, because I think it's us in the future. We figured out basically time travel through dimensions, and there we are.
But also, like I was saying with the ghost stuff, I think with there's lots of different explanations, and people want to get just one explanation because people like everything in a box. And as long as it fits in their box, the explanation, they're good with it. They don't want to go outside of that. They don't want to think about this ethereal stuff that we're thinking about and getting the weeds with it. There could be different explanations for UFOs, UAPs, all the paranormal stuff, and also the way that we're talking, it's all connected.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're talking about Bigfoot, UFOs, Augmen, Ghost. The paranormal is all connected in this weird way, especially if it is all vibrational, interdimensional stuff. Yeah. It's all the same, just in different forms.
Yeah, exactly. You're just looking at potentially different frequencies, different levels, different volumes. Who knows how that all works? But I do want to ask you about your book, because I think a lot of the stuff that we've kind of spoken about here makes me kind of curious, because the whole the small town haunt and legends of Tennessee, like that digs into stories that, from what you've told me, is that stories that most people have never heard of. And that kind of goes into what we're talking about, like how things don't fit in a box. So, what inspired you to go down that route and kind of, instead of telling classic stories from that area, like the Bell Witch and things like that?
Well, growing up, we're kind of in Nashville. We're kind of the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And Appalachia has a huge tradition of storytelling. And I think it's important to carry that on in a way with the ghost stories and things like that, because I think these stories have been around, especially in Appalachia, in this part of the country of the United States, for a long, long time. And that started with the Irish immigrants coming over. Really is where it started, settling in Appalachia. They had a rich history of storytelling with fairies and all the folklore that comes from Ireland and Scotland and England. And it's just kind of come down through the pipeline to newer generations. And I think with the internet, it's carried on in a certain way. But I think you lose a little bit of it too when you get into just videos about it and stuff, because the content is so quickly digestible and then forgotten. I think with a book and storytelling by mouth, and with a book, I think it sticks a whole lot more. So part of it's coming from that storytelling tradition of the book is true to the best of my ability to prove it's true, right? It's because a ghost story, you can't completely vet it. You have to believe what people have experienced and say they've experienced. As far as the history, it's as true as I can find history. But you always hear about, like you said, the Bell Witch, Hopkinsville Goblin. You have these big giant cases, and then also even places like in Nashville, like the Ryman Auditorium was world famous. And you can easily look up the hauntings of the Ryman online. There's been plenty of books that the Ryman has been in. Even like Memphis, there's plenty of places. There's plenty of places like the bigger cities around Tennessee and kind of around the United States. And I'm sure this is the same where you're from. You have this handful of folklore about the area that you live in. And if you're not from there, you're probably not familiar with it. Also, the history of the area that you're from. Most people who don't live there or never lived there don't know the history. Probably half the people who moved there don't know the history unless they're some kind of history buff and dive into it. So it's about teaching people this interesting history of these places they've never heard of. That's more interesting than what they teach you in school, I think, a lot of it. And then also, like I said, teaching people about the history, but also entertaining with the ghost stories. But also, I think the ghost stories say a lot about the history too, like we've been talking about. So I think they go hand in hand. But there's so many of these places that you don't see on TV that are haunted and don't have a problem with talking about the experiences they've had, people have had in the houses and things. And so I think they need to be out there just as much as the TV shows. Not necessarily even to bring like tourism there or for investigators to go there and rent the place out or whatever, but just to bring them to light, because like I was talking about, it's honoring these people's history, and they're just as important as the founding fathers of the United States that we hear about all the time. And people like that, you know, or even modern day celebrities. I think these people are probably more important to me than modern day celebrities, but because people are famous just for being famous nowadays. But
yeah, no, I fully commend you for what you're doing there, because I'm a big believer of protecting like hidden history. And that's kind of what you're doing with these stories and stuff like that, because like while people may talk about them, they're not really cataloged. They're not brought together and organized in a way that's easily digestible or an easy way to share. And I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I know for me, that's half the reason that I kind of started this podcast, is because I was hearing stories of, you know, over in America and things like that, of people having these unbelievable encounters like with Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts and stuff like that. And none of these types of phenomena are kind of, this only happens in this one area. So I started this whole podcast because I knew there was people close to me who are having these types of encounters, and I wanted to share them. So yeah, my hat goes off to you for essentially doing that same thing, because these stories, while the people aren't famous, like they are important, because what it does is it kind of solidifies each and every person's encounter. And if someone else has had that same encounter and they don't know how to process it, or they don't really understand it, it helped them. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Also, are you wanting more content? Why not become a Believe Plus member? You'll get access to exclusive podcasts and episodes that aren't available to the public. Not only that, you'll also get our regular feed without any ads. Head to believepod.com/plus to sign up today for just $5 a month.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one reason I started my podcast, was not only was I curious to talk to other people, from authors to, you know, investigators to all that, to learn more for myself, but to also put on a platform that says you're not crazy. You know, I've had incredible crazy experiences that sound made up, you know, and so yeah, that was part of my motivation for the podcast as well. Most of my podcast was motivation for me to talk to people that I've always wanted to talk to, so it gave me a platform to do that. You know, on a certain level, kind of selfishly. You know? Yeah,
no, I get it. It is a great way to talk to these people who you've maybe not idolized, but you know, you've kind of like read so much into their own encounters, like to kind of get that information firsthand. I think it adds something special to those types of encounters as well.
Well, and also to get it straight from the person, instead of, okay, I've seen them on a TV show or whatever. And not even paranormal celebrities, but people like Dr. Raymond Moody. Dr. Raymond Moody, he's been on, since the 70s, been on so many documentaries and things, Unsolved Mysteries and all this other stuff. He's the psychologist who coined the term near-death experience. And to get to talk to him for 2.5 hours on the phone, I thought was amazing, because he's somebody that most people won't get to have a personal conversation with and pick his brain. He, in the 70s, came up with near-death experience and was one of the first serious scientists to study that phenomenon, and a very, very intelligent man. But to talk to people like that, and also have another record of him talking on a different level in like a nonchalant way, like we are today, instead of like a very formatted interview like he's always done, but to get him in a more relaxed setting, I think is really cool too. Not saying I'm the only one that's ever done that, but for me, I was just like amazed at just picking this guy's brain, because I respect him so much for the things that he's done for the paranormal, that it was just, and he's getting older now. He's in his 80s, so he's not going to be around forever. And so to talk to him, and like Andrea Perrin, to talk to her, she's from the Conjuring house. That was her family. In the movie, they used their last name, the Perrins, and she was the oldest daughter. And so to actually talk to her about what really happened in that house versus the movie and all the conjecture that you hear from other people and things, I think, for me, is a lot better, especially asking her direct questions of like, well, how much of the Conjuring movie is true? And she told me 5%. That tells you how Hollywood is, but to get it straight from the person, I think is more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like the peek behind the curtain, which is for people like us. And I like being selfish like this sometimes. It feels like it's the best reward ever. And I'm about to do that myself, because you're organizing the I always have trouble saying this, the name of the location. So Hopkinsville, the Goblin incident there. So this is an incident that happened, well, technically 70 years ago. You're doing the 70th anniversary Goblin Con for that. So for people who don't know what we're talking about, can you give me just the 30,000 foot view look at what the Goblin incident is?
So right outside of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and Hopkinsville is in western Kentucky. Right outside of Hopkinsville, in a little town called Kelly, which has basically been swallowed up by Hopkinsville now. And that's why it's been known. It used to be the Kelly Greenman incident, and you can find that way too, but that's why it's become known as the Hopkinsville Goblin, because Kelly, if you blink, you'll miss it. It's like 5 minutes outside the city limits. Anyway, in 1955, August 21st and the 22nd, 1955, the Sutton family on their farm experienced these goblins. And it started out with the family friend who had come with the Sutton son. They were best friends, and they had come to the mom's to have dinner at her farm. And I think they were 18 and 19 years old. And so they were kind of just going off on their own. And the friend claimed that he saw a flying saucer land at the back of the farm. Well, they thought he had done gotten into the moonshine, and told him he was crazy, until they all started going in the house, because he was trying to show them where it landed. And they started to go in the house, and Mrs. Sutton sees one of these goblins, and one of them reached down from the roof and tried to grab her son's hair to pull him up on the roof. Well, they all go in the house, and they load up with their shotguns and things. I mean, these are farmers. They go out, and back in 1955, they're going out hunting their, deer and things for their own food and things like that. And so these people knew what kind of creatures live around them. They knew the woods like the back of their hand. They knew what creatures lived in the woods. So anyway, for the next 5 hours, they get attacked by these 3 foot tall, silver looking creatures. It finally kind of, and they're shooting through their own windows, through their own doors, through their own walls at these things. And these things are trying to get in. And these goblins, they don't have weapons, but they're kind of impervious to the bullets. They kind of bounce off them like they had some sort of chainmail type suit or something on that was stopping the shotgun shells and things. And they finally get to sneak out to Hopkinsville after 5.5 hours, and they get the sheriff to come out. And the goblins kind of disappeared when the sheriff came out, and you have all these people who are wondering what's going on. And this is about 3 or 4 in the morning. And the sheriff, like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, I believe you, because I have no reason not to believe you. You just shot up your own house that you don't have the money to fix because you're a poor farming family. You shot out your own windows. You wasted all this money on ammo. And so he believed them. And there was a reporter that came out and did a sketch. He actually took the friend, the son, and the mom all separate and had them describe the goblins. And they all described the same thing. So the picture of the 3 that you can look up, those are individual sketches that they were taken aside. So to give
I didn't know that.
Seems pretty crazy. Yeah. You see them put together now, but they were actually individually done. And so for them to get that close of describing the goblins, 3 of them, people can't keep a little bitty white lie straight, let alone something like that. And also the family had nothing to gain. So anyway, the sheriff and everybody leaves. They decide, because she still had little kids that were like 7, 8 years old. So they were scared. And so she's trying to get them to bed because it's like 5 in the morning at this point. And the goblins attacked again. And they fought them off. And as soon as the sun started to rise, the goblins left. And where the spaceship flying saucer supposedly landed, I've been told that nothing will grow there in a circle. Grass barely grows there, but it never gets tall. Nothing ever grows. And this is on the back of like a farm where they just allow the kind of the land to grow wild. So in the end, 2 weeks after the incident happens, Mrs. Sutton sells the family farm and moves to an apartment in Hopkinsville because she was afraid, for one, that they were going to come back, because there's no guarantee they wouldn't. And they had this traumatic experience. And also, people were just coming on their property stealing things as souvenirs of the Hopkinsville Goblin because it made the media, and it made national media.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the gist of it. It's a lot more involved, and that's just kind of the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, no, and it is one of the most fascinating, I guess, alien encounters that I've ever really come across, because it is just so out of the normal when you hear about other encounters. Like you hear about the Zimbabwe school encounter, you hear about the Westall school encounter, and these types of entities, or aliens or creatures or whatever you want to call them, like they aren't hostile, they're not attacking, they're not dangerous or anything like that. But the Hopkinsville Goblin story is just so different. And like you said, this family had absolutely nothing to gain from this. They're shooting up their own house. They basically run it straight into the ground. And like, to this day, it's still completely unknown what really happened there. What do you think was kind of going on? And I know it's complete speculation, but I'm genuinely curious, because you're organizing Goblin Con, so this is obviously something that is quite close to you. What's your take on the whole thing?
So I also know Geraldine Sutton-Stith. She's the daughter. That was her grandmother's farm. And Geraldine wasn't born then. Geraldine is not that old. She was born in the late 60s, but she's kind of carried on the family mantle. She was put out her, I think, 4th book about the incident. And the crazy thing is, her family's always stuck to the story. Even up until recently, her sister went to work at a factory in Hopkinsville about 5 or 6 years ago and quit the job because they found out who she was, what family she was from, and bullied her because of the Goblin incident. But also Geraldine still has her aunts and uncles that were the ones that were 7, 8 years old when it happened. They're still alive, and they won't talk about it. And Geraldine didn't even hear about the story until she was 8 years old, because her dad didn't talk about it, because it was her dad that had the experience with his best friend and his mom, her grandmother. And so the fact that this family has stuck to the story for this many years, and the fact that Geraldine wasn't even told the story because they didn't talk about it until she was 8. It's just all these things point to, why would this family do this and endure this long of ridicule by some people, for 70 years?
Yeah.
And Geraldine's been fighting uphill by writing the books over the years and carrying on the story and going to conventions and speaking and things to try to carry on this crazy thing that happened to her family, and to prove that her family's not crazy, that they're not a bunch of crazy people. And the only explanation anybody ever really came up with was that it was owls. And I'm like, but if they're shooting at owls, for one, you're going to find a bunch of dead owls. There's going to be feathers everywhere. You're going to find a bunch of crazy stuff with that. But also, why would owls attack for 5 hours? And these people are in the house. Why would the owls be trying to get in the house? It made no sense to me whatsoever. Also, right outside of Hopkinsville, 20 minutes from Hopkinsville, you have Fort Campbell Army Base, where the 101st Airborne is, the famous 101st Airborne, and all that. The Army came out and investigated, and they never discredited what happened. They never put out a statement for or against. But yet, a few years earlier, in 1947, in Roswell, New Mexico, they adamantly denied what happened in Roswell. But then you have the Hopkinsville Goblin incident. They come out, do a little investigation, and they don't say a word. They didn't put out disinformation in the newspaper saying that didn't happen, these people are crazy. Nothing. They stayed quiet about it. And I think that's very telling, because it has become, and it was such a big thing when it happened, because Roswell had happened, and then in 1955 you have this happen. So it was a big thing in the news. And so for the Army to stay silent, I think, to me, tells a lot too, because I would expect them to jump out ahead of it and be in the paper saying, no, these people are crazy. It's swamp gas,
Yeah.
like whatever their stupid explanation is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like the Goblin stories kind of even live on to today, because there's a fantastic documentary series on YouTube called Hellier, and Hellier was kind of the documentary series that got me into wanting to make documentaries, because it is done just so beautifully, and the amount of detail that they kind of go into, and like they do branch off, I will admit, a lot to other things that maybe don't matter too much to the whole Goblin incident, but it does give you a little bit of an insight into what potentially really happened there, because they go down a whole bunch of other paths that kind of go down like, hey, did these things come from the caves? Did they come from the bush or the forest over there? And it really gets you thinking about it, because there's so many people that are really attached to this incident, because again, like you said, it didn't happen just for a blink of an eye or anything like that. It went on for a while.
Yeah. And also, not only did that happen around that time, but the Thomas Mantell incident happened not far from there in Franklin, Kentucky, where he was believed to be shot down by a UFO. He was an airplane pilot. He was a fighter pilot and a test pilot, I believe. It's been a while since I've seen the story. But his plane crashed in Franklin, Kentucky. And they believe it's the only jet to ever be shot down by a UFO.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so you have all this crazy stuff like that. And then a little bit north of Hopkinsville, in the 60s, I believe, 60s or 70s, there were 3 women who claimed that they had missing time and were abducted. And they had this weird radiation sickness that went on for years that doctors couldn't get a handle on. And so there's all of these. It's not just the Hopkinsville Goblin. So for me, you put all these incidents in there, and then Eastern Kentucky, where Hellier is, with the goblins there years later. And these people just, in Hellier, it's just a known thing that these goblins come out of the mining caves, and so Kentucky's a weird place. It's a weird place.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so does this whole case, like, does it continue to fascinate people all this time later?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's huge. It's huge because it's known around the world. It's one of those rare cases that's known around the world. I mean, you put it in the same category as like Roswell. People around the world know Roswell. The Sicaro case. You familiar with the Sicaro case, the deputy in the desert?
Yep.
It's a huge one. And so it's just right up there in the top, like 3 or 4 that people just know, because it was a 5-6 hour siege. And it's also one of the only cases where people claim that the aliens attacked, like you were saying. Most of them are very benevolent, nothing violent, but it's one of the rare cases where, these people were attacked. And also, like we were saying, they seem to be pretty credible because of all the different things, like them being taken up individually and doing the same sketch. And, the story has stayed the same over the years too. It hasn't really deviated. And when you make something up like that, it's going to change. Especially after 20 years, you're still telling a story. There's going to be major things that you change just because you don't remember the original lie, But if it's a fact, you can't change facts, You may misremember little things, but as far as the, gist of it, but no, I think it's in the consciousness of, if you're into UFOs, especially all around the world, everybody knows about it. And that's why it's a big thing to celebrate the 70th anniversary too. In Kelly, the little town of Kelly, excuse me, up until COVID, they did a little festival here that drew thousands of people. Well, after COVID, they never picked it back up. They got stopped because of COVID for a couple of years, and the town just never picked it back up. So that's why Visit Hopkinsville, which is the tourist bureau for Hopkinsville, decided this year to pick it up for the 70th anniversary. And we're actually, Geraldine is on our committee and part of telling her family's legacy and celebrating her family's legacy. And the big thing that I've kind of taken from the get-go of it with being the event coordinator is celebrating that legacy in a way that brings all different kinds of people together. So it's not just a UFO convention, it's a paranormal convention too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
We're going to have Bigfoot speakers, ghosts,
the
whole gamut.
Yeah, I can imagine like these types of events, like they kind of bring everyone out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Because again, like the whole Goblin thing could be really open to interpretation, because like you said, like a lot of people think they come out of the caves, people think they come out of the bush, people think they may be aliens. So there's so many different things that, people believe that they could be, that it's just open for anyone to kind of come in and enjoy themselves at a festival like this. So that, like, that kind of answers the question. I was going to ask you, like, do the locals kind of embrace the history?
A lot of them do. You still have especially with the older generation that just thinks it's all crazy and that this was a crazy family. They got into their own stash of moonshine. And, I've still heard that explanation and the whole owl thing. But I think for the most part, I think even just for fun, the community embraces it. We're going to do a thing with these 3-foot tall concrete alien statues that we're going to have different, like the fire department's going to paint one, however they want to paint it. The police department's going to do one, and all these businesses. And we're going to put them around town as a scavenger hunt. And the town is going crazy over it.
Oh, that's cool.
And the top place team is going to win VIP tickets to Goblin Con or whatever. And we have all these prizes and stuff, but the town has fun with it. And I think with having a tourist bureau, they've definitely helped with that too, because it does bring a lot of tourists in to see where this happened. And a lot of people from all around the world come to see what they can find out about the Hopkinsville Goblins.
Yeah, for sure. Talking about that, have you ever uncovered any new information or theories about the incident while preparing for the event?
I have not. Geraldine just put out a new book with some new information. She found some old interviews that she didn't know existed and some other stuff she didn't know existed that's been around. So it's not stuff she made up, but it's just come to light and sheds a little more light on the stuff. But she just put a new book out with that. One of the things that I'm glad you asked that question, because we did discover something that is going to be a surprise to Geraldine, and she won't see the show, I don't think. So it'd be great if she did. But the radio station that we're working with to advertise Goblin Con, they actually found the original radio news clip from their radio station from 1955.
No kidding.
It's about 3 minutes long, and I've put a video with it. And so we're going to surprise Geraldine with that, because she's never heard it, didn't even know it existed. We didn't know it existed until I started working the radio station, because I'm doing the voiceover. I did the voiceover for the commercials for Goblin Con. And so working with them, they're like, oh, we have this little bit of history. And it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's the old timey, you can hear it crackling and popping. It's the old timey news reports of the day, like Walter Cronkite and that type of news report. And it's a news reporter. It's very interesting. But for them to dig that up is really awesome.
That is really cool. And I know how hopeless like radio stations can be. And for them to keep that is actually the coolest little thing. Look, I do have a couple of questions. Like I have to ask, because you've done podcasting, you've done book writing, you're doing basically conventions now. Yeah. Do you feel like the public is becoming a little bit more open to like the weird and the wonderful that's kind of out there? And especially since we've got all this recent UFO news, like UFOs seem to be a really hot topic at the moment. What's your thoughts about that? Like, do you think the public is becoming a little bit more open to it?
Yes, I do. And I find it interesting because in the late 1800s, the second half of the 1860s up until 1900s, you have the spiritualist movement where ghosts were huge. And it was just, but then you get into the early 1900s, you talk about spirits and seeing spirits, and they put you in a straitjacket and take you to the mental hospital. So now we've come back around full circle to not necessarily the spiritualist movement of believing in all this quack stuff, like, people pulling ectoplasm out of their mouth and mediums and things like that. But I think we kind of come back around to a sense of sanity in a way, I guess, of looking at things in our world instead of just ignoring them. Some people look at like the 1940s and 50s after the World War II as the good old days. No, that was the closeted days where people wanted their little boxes and their little box houses and their jobs and wanted to ignore anything that was outside of that. And so I think it's great. And I think a lot of people are coming around open-minded. I think COVID had a huge play on that too. People actually had to stay at home and pay attention to their own environment. They didn't have a choice. And so they had to slow their life down. And I think it made a lot of people realize, wow, there's such a bigger world outside than my little routine of get up, get the kids up, they go to school, I go to work, we come home, make dinner, go to bed. And they're in this just cycle, or we go to kids' sports or whatever their thing is, and they get in this cycle. And I think COVID was a blessing in a way that broke that cycle, and people actually had to pay attention to the things around them they normally don't. So a lot of people found out their houses are actually haunted, And I've had people come up to me and talk to me about that because they just never were home enough or paid enough attention to really see weird things happening around them on basis.
Isn't that insane that like people are just living their lives so fast, so loose, so quickly that it took a pandemic for them to realize that, hey, there's like knocks and bumps in the night in our house. Yeah. This isn't normal.
Well, I think there's even been, with COVID, there's even been an uptick in people being interested in Bigfoot research and dogmen and things. I think that's why that's all a huge resurgence the past couple of years, especially with dogmen and people being so fascinated with dogmen, because people are actually going out in the woods and having experiences and seeing things to where they normally wouldn't go out in the woods, but because of social distancing things, that was the safest place to go. Safest place to go. That's why Eric don't camp. I don't camp because I'm scared of the things pulling me out of the tent that I know exist for sure, like mountain lions and things, let alone a Bigfoot pulling me out and me against a tree or something.
I quickly have to say this. I do not know how you guys even venture out into the wilderness over there because, everyone thinks like everything's trying to kill you here in Australia, and it's absolutely crap. Everything over in the States is trying to kill you out in the bush. Like a moose is going to kill you over there if it gets the chance. Over here, you just have to worry about like a crocodile's in the water. Like that's pretty far away from you. There's maybe a snake or two, but usually they genuinely leave you alone. Over there, you've got bears, you've got everything. You've got mountain lions. It's ridiculous. I would not step outside out there into the wilderness. I do not understand that at all.
Yeah, but it's funny that you said, we think you all the same way. Because we're just used to our environments, And for the most part, bears and mountain lions and things like that, they don't bother you. Mountain lions, you'll never know one's around unless it decides to attack you. They're such masters of their environment, camouflage and being stealthy, the way their paws are built and stuff. You'll never hear them crunch on leaves or anything. Even deer. We are so inundated with deer. That's why they let people hunt them so much, because they run out from the cars and the population gets out of control. But unless a deer wants you to know it's there, you'll never hear them. They're just masters of their environment. Bobcats the same way. Bears, they become humanized with people feeding them and things. That's part of the problem with bears. But that's in the mountains. We're starting to have them around Nashville again. They're starting to move back in, which is crazy to see black bears last summer, 2 of them in downtown Nashville, when we're, a couple hundred miles away from the mountains. But no, we think it's the same thing about Australia because, but you got to think also American TV, everything is the top 10 things in Australia that'll kill you, the deadliest spider in the world, the deadliest snake in the world, It's always from Australia, so
look, I do get that, and it's something that it is weird that, especially where I live here in Australia. I live in the tropical far north region of Australia, so up here there's basically everything that is dangerous and that can kill you is native to where I am, and up here you just kind of taught as you're growing up, don't go near there because you will get eaten, your arm will get ripped off. So I'm sure it's the same over there. Well, let's mutually agree we both live in the most incredibly dangerous situations in the world.
You're right.
But Eric, I have to ask you, mate, you're already working on your next book. Can you give us a little teaser? Like what are people, what should they prepare themselves for?
So the next book is Small Town Haunts and Legends of Kentucky. So a lot of the weirdness that we've been talking about with Kentucky is going to go in there. There's some crazy stuff. Just incredible stories and folklore. The way I set the Tennessee book up is almost like an old coffee table book, kind of like a reference book. The first section is legends, and then I have West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, East Tennessee to kind of break it up into sections. And so you can also jump around, and you don't have to read the book kind of linearly. But the legends sections for Kentucky, I'm doing my research, I already have 25 legends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm talking everything from sheep squatch to a Kentucky meat shower to the Paintsville UFO incident where a flying saucer supposedly collided with the engine of a train.
Really?
And it tore the engine all up and nothing happened to the UFO. It flew off just fine.
That's interesting. There's a gentleman here in Australia. His name's Ben Hurl, and he does a fantastic presentation on UFOs and trains. There seems to be this super weird connection with them. And I'm actually he'll probably be a guest on the podcast right after your episode aired, actually, because I want to get him on here to talk about that whole weird connection, because again, it's just one of these things that just seems so out of place. It doesn't make sense. Like, why would this, potentially dimension hopping kind of piece of equipment have a fascination with trains? And for me, that makes me think like there is this weird connection of, past and present, future, present, things like that when it comes to the whole UFO thing.
Yeah. And also I find a fascination. It's Dogmen and Bigfoot have become really connected. And in close to Hopkinsville, there's a place called Land Between the Lakes, which is getting very well known for dogmen, because there's supposedly a family that was killed back in the 80s and the government covered it up. But and all these other people go missing and things like that. But yeah, I found that the UFOs are connected to certain things like that. I've never heard the train connection. That's the first time I've ever heard the train connection. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating.
When that episode comes out, mate, I'll send you a link to it. But you can keep the Dogman. Dogman encounters are like a super, super rare thing here in Australia. We'll have all the Yowie encounters and stuff like that. That's the Australian Bigfoot. But yeah, thankfully, Dogman encounters are quite low here in Australia. So hopefully that stays that way, because that just seems too far, man. That stuff is just
terrifying.
It's way too terrifying. It's absolute nightmare fuel. So you guys can keep that, keep the bears, keep all that dangerous shit over there. We'll just keep the crocodiles and the koalas.
Right.
But mate, before I let you go, Eric, where can everyone find your book and kind of keep up with everything that you're kind of working on at the moment?
The best place to find me is on Facebook, Eric Freeman Sims. I have a public profile, so anybody can friend me, anybody can follow me. That's the best place to find out everything I have going on. I post everything there, from the night house, the 200-year-old house, to the Goblin Con stuff, to the book stuff. That's the best place is Facebook. And the book is available Amazon in paperback, hardback, and on Kindle. And you can also get it through barnesandnoble.com, through goodreads.com, and pretty much anywhere you find books, Apple eBooks. It's kind of everywhere at this point. So,
mate, that is excellent. What I'll do is I'll also put a link in the show notes with all your links. So people who want to find out any more about you or buy your book or anything like that, just jump into the show notes of this episode and you can find out where Eric has all that lovely content. But mate, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. It's very rare I kind of get to talk to someone kind of in the game, so to say. And you're so many steps ahead of me, which is a real privilege to talk to you, because the fact that you're organizing events, you've got books, you've got tours, you've got everything kind of going on, mate. It was a real treat chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was good to chat with you too. It's interesting because I actually retired from the medical field after 20 years and went full bore into the paranormal about 5 years ago. So I was a medic on the ambulance for 15 years. And so how that equates from the medical field to what I do now, I don't know. But yeah, to retire from one career and go into another crazy career, buying a haunted house and stuff, I don't know how it happened. It just happened. So
I could imagine in the world of being a paramedic, you probably saw crazier things than you've probably seen in the paranormal. So you've probably taken a backward steps and just relaxing a little bit now.
Yeah, the worst monsters are real. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. People are scarier than Bigfoot ever will be.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Believe Paranormal and UFO podcast. If you have had an encounter and you would like to share it, please get in touch with me. My email address is believepod@gmail.com. Finally, don't forget to follow us on all our social media outlets and be sure to join our Discord server to talk to other listeners of the show. You'll find all these links in our show notes. Thank you.